Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for registering to attend this webinar called The Future of Customer Identity and Verification. My name is Clive Burke and I work for Diane. I look after the EMEA and Asia business, and I've been working in the field of identity and biometrics for about 23 years or plus and counting, and enjoying it still. We have a great webinar hopefully for you today, a good list of panelists who are all active in the digital identity space for their respective businesses, who introduce in a few minutes. Thanks for registering and attending and making the time. This is a panel discussion, so it'll really be questions and answers where I'll be fielding questions to the panelists, questions we've got in advance and some questions that come in as the webinar is going on. So if you're attending and would like to listen or would like to submit some questions, please do. We'd welcome any questions that you might put in. To start with, what I think we would do is start moving towards just telling a little bit about Diane. So if I do that first, we see ourselves as a digital identity trust company, and we specialize in the field of digital identity and onboarding or identity verification, what we're talking about today. But coupling that with authentication, whether that's facial recognition or FIDO authentication, and doing the full identity lifecycle across all the channels, so web, mobile, contact center, in person, and doing all the types of things you'd expect to do, like identity recovery, lost devices, fraud prevention, and so on and so forth. So that's really enough about us, and I promise that's the only slide you'll see today, apart from my pleasure to introduce the panelists. So I might ask the panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Laura, then Shanna, then Maria. So these are the speakers we have today. So Laura, I might let you go next.
Brilliant, thanks Clive. So I'm Laura Murphy and I'm here from NatWest, and I look after our biometric authentication team within the retail customer propositions and journeys. So what that means in practice is, how do we support as many customers as possible with the strongest and most secure form of authentication, which is biometrics? And how can we use the power of that tool to make digital banking really seamless and easy for customers? My background is I've been in the identity space for nearly 4 years now, so hopefully one day I can be just as excited as Clive to be spending 20 years in the space, and have been in NatWest for around 8 years.
Cool, thanks Laura. Shanna, would you like to introduce yourself if you don't mind?
Yeah, thank you, Clive. Hi, everyone. My name is Shanna Camilleri. I am joining from TikTok Shop, which is TikTok e-commerce platform based in London. I look after all of our onboarding, registration and verification for sellers on the platform across Europe. Again, what that means is we're an e-commerce platform, so we're enabling business, but obviously there's a critical component of making sure that we manage the risks and that we are set up for what's upcoming with all of our expansion plans across the Europe region.
Thanks, Shanna. And when people think of TikTok, they don't automatically think of the TikTok shop and sellers within the TikTok shop, but that's the perspective that you're coming from today, so appreciate that. And Maria?
Hi, everybody. Well, thank you for having me here. I'm Maria. I'm VP of Product for DSL Facing Group. We are in the gaming industry, so a little bit of a different perspective from everybody else. With the DSL Facing Group, we host a platform for online competitions, ranging from matchmaking to several tournaments. And one of the aspects that I look after is community integrity. So how are we protecting our players from different kind of abusive behaviors, and identity verification comes into that strategy.
And protecting your players is key to what your focus, and that's what you're going to be coming from today. So all of the panelists, including myself, come from different perspectives, but all interested in digital identity and digital identity verification. I will say that all the panelists are speaking in their personal perspective, on their own personal opinions, not exercising opinions on behalf of their brands or companies, and that allows us to have a freer or more open conversation. So thank you guys for doing that. So I'm going to stop sharing the application, the PowerPoint, and just move into Q&A. So do that. Let me do that now. Okay, hopefully everybody can see everything okay. Okay, so I'm going to kick off with the first question. So I joke this is like the obligatory AI question that we have to get out of the way at the beginning, but it's actually not about deepfakes per se. It's more about, there's a lot of concern and talk about AI and fraud related threats, but actually you guys in your roles, you actually have to talk to your stakeholders, your users and everybody about what you're doing about it. So it's more about the messaging about what you're doing about it and stuff like that. So I might throw that question out to all the panelists. And Laura, if you don't mind, I'll throw that one straight to you first.
Yeah, brilliant. Yes, it's definitely something that we're spending a lot of time talking about, more so than ever. You know, the threat of AI, and does it break everything that we've ever done ever? And you know, is the kingdom open to all of the fraudsters out there as a result? And what has really helped with how we position that with our stakeholders is the threat is exactly the same. The threat is impersonation. And this is just a far more elegant way of being able to impersonate someone. So all of the controls that we have built in are able to identify and stop impersonation as it happens. The real difference with this is just the pace. So this is where actually I think it can give us a lot of energy, and the industry a lot of energy, around the pace at which we respond when we see threats, because they will be coming so much faster. So we need to be able to respond faster. But from a stakeholder point of view, that is what I have found has worked particularly well. It's also quite interesting to see customers increasingly talking about it. So it's become part of the language. You probably see this in the way that we speak to our friends and family that probably weren't speaking about AI before, but they are speaking about deepfakes now. So actually, I think we have a deep obligation to educate and bring our customers along with us to make sure that they have caution in the face of those threats, but that it's not really scary, because that's the last thing that we want.
Absolutely, absolutely. Maria, I might throw that to you as well, if you don't mind.
Yes, of course. So I'm quite aligned with what Laura has been saying. I believe that the pace is the real challenge that we are seeing here. Like, for example, in the gaming industry, the way we are using verification is obviously to prevent people having multiple accounts on our platform. And reality is that they have always found ways to try to go around that, which don't necessarily require AI. There's like boosting services out there that are selling verified accounts, and they have people that they pay to just go and verify that account for them, and then it's verified in the name of somebody else, and then that account is sold on to another person. So we are looking into ways to prevent that, and that's maybe something that we're going to talk on later on in the panel as well. I feel like AI is not necessarily posing new threats. It's just changing like the pace at which we need to react to them, because obviously now it's a lot easier to impersonate somebody, but it's not like you couldn't impersonate somebody else in the online world 2 years ago. It's just like probably like 2 clicks away now, maybe before you needed to put in a little bit more effort. At the same time, I think whilst AI is actually used for fraud, we can also leverage AI to make our systems better. So in that sense, like partnering with a strong technological provider, like in our case, obviously Deon, I feel like it's extremely helpful, because obviously it helps knowing that you also have, on one side, yes, people are becoming smarter at deepfakes or other kind of impersonification, but at the same time, as AI can be used for that, it can also be used for good. So we do have more ways of detecting that is happening, combining it with other data points. For example, like lots of analysis is being done around behavioral data, so how you're clicking with your mouse on the screen or things like that, which is all stuff that was not possible before.
Yeah, there's a lot in what you answered there, Maria. So one is like there's a lot of threats that were there before AI and continue, like the so-called mule accounts that a lot of our clients have to worry about. And then there's several other aspects to it. Shanna, what do you think about this topic?
Yeah, I think I do really want to echo a lot of the points that Maria and Laura made. I think for us, really, you know, it's been a journey of bringing our internal stakeholders on board, a lot of the business units in particular, in trying to bring them along with us and really understanding how the threats are evolving and what we're trying to address them. So whether it is, integrating with partners like Dayon and others to try and counter that, but also telling them, I think, Laura, Maria, you made a really good point about, kind of bringing them onto that journey of saying we can also use AI to our advantage to bring more business, to be able to make verification faster. So it doesn't always have to be only threats, but we do have to bring them across that end-to-end journey and making sure that, we have strong business case. And what really has worked for us really well is showing them really what we see and, how it is evolving with real cases and the threat that it causes to our business and the impact financially that it can have as well. That has truly helped bringing them on board into that journey with us.
Very good, Shannon. Appreciate that. Well, I might just segue into another topic that's really topical at the moment, which is a question we got in advance: online age assurance. So I have a 13-year-old, just turned 13, who wanted to get access to new apps, including some that we might be all familiar with. But it's actually not just about access to certain types of apps. I mean, governments, educators, everybody around the world is talking about online age assurance right now. So could you talk to us, maybe I'll throw this to Shanna and then Maria, like the importance of age verification and age estimation and age verification itself. How important is that to you, and how do you go about doing it, basically?
Yeah, it's very essential. I mean, our platform is 18+, so whether it's for sellers or creators. On the seller side, I think really the approach that we've taken, given it is mandatory and we do have to do that, is really, again, making sure that our sellers understand why we have to do this. So being transparent with them around the needs that we have, and then also making sure that they understand fully how it's conducted, how we're going to go about it, what are the possible methods that we have, so having different options available to them, and also making sure that they understand what recourse did they have if they don't agree with the decision, so really being fully transparent about the process that we have to ensure that we are meeting our obligations. I think, it's definitely critical, right? I think we can't let sellers who are not 18 to be able to trade on an e-commerce platform. And if you think more broadly, for creators, you've got similar obligations as well. So, it's really been at the forefront of what we're thinking about. It's also, it's how we do it in a transparent way while making sure that we address all of the safety concerns.
And Shannon, just to confirm the relationship between creators and sellers in your world, could you just explain that in the context of the shop?
Absolutely. So in the context of shop, a seller can be a creator. So you can be selling on the platform, but you can also be creating content about your own products. Or you can also be partnering with a lot of the creators that we have on the platform to also show your products. So you can be both a seller and a creator, or you can be just a seller or just a creator. So obviously, that comes into making sure that they meet both obligations on both sides. So it definitely is, we try to make sure that our processes are seamless when it comes to these different types of, partners.
Fantastic, very good. And Maria, this is also a key topic for you as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to Face It, so our digital platform, it's quite a complex topic for us for multiple reasons. So on one side, we don't make video games ourselves, but we integrate with different video games. Our platform is 13+, but some of the games that we support or integrate with could have a different rating, so they might be 18+. So there's that consideration at play. We are also digital business, so we are obviously, but as anybody could expect, we serve advertising on the platform. We have different brands that want to partner with us, either to do branded sponsorships, branded campaigns, or like standard programmatic digital advertising. And obviously, like some of the brands that want to partner with us could be 18+, for example, like think about betting companies or some like even products like Red Bull or similar. So there's like some considerations that they might not be necessarily appropriate for a 13-year-old. So that like that comes into play when we consider age verifications. And in the gaming industry for a very long time, a lot of companies were just and that was like how everybody was doing it. We were just accepting self-declaration when making an account, because obviously that was frictionless, and a player would come in, sign up, declare their age, and that was it. Now we are obviously there's on one side more regulatory pressure. In the UK, there's the Online Safety Act, which obviously applies to any online product, us included. But on the other side, also kids are exposed to a lot of harmful content for them on online platforms. And one of the ways that we were tackling it before has always been through moderation, and actually artificial intelligence played a role into that. And it was like trying to detect possible harmful behaviors towards people that they might think they're kids, or us being able to identify them as kids. Identity verification has been helpful in that regards. On our platform, it's not mandatory. You choose to opt in and do identity verification. And obviously we have different flows if you are underage, but then that also allows us to say, okay, well, these are definitely kids. We know about that, and now we're going to treat them differently. We have been exploring a few other ideas that are popping up, and one of them is obviously around face recognition. So from your face, there's a lot of AI improvements. It's now possible to sort of identify or have a best estimate whether you are under 18 or not. So that's something that we have been looking into. There's also a few companies and providers that have started doing age verification by checking with either third-party database or phone companies or other utilities that people might have or not have, or credit cards and so on. So one of the ideas is also leveraging that. I think for us, what we are trying to do is find a sweet spot, because obviously we are talking about kids, so we want to protect them. At the same time, we also don't want to necessarily collect information that we might not need. Obviously parents could be worried about their kids having to provide us with their document or their face. Might not always something that they want to do. It also increases friction for them. So we are trying to, in that space of, trying to find what is the sweet spot so that we can protect them, keep them safe. At the same time, we are not putting a lot of a burden on them or their parents.
And Maria, it's a really great answer, but just explain to people one of the reasons is separate to age verification. Why you want to know your players is so that
Yeah, so gaming is an industry where typically you are anonymous. So that's one thing that has always been around in gaming. You can choose to be whoever you want to be. Normally, when I'm gaming, I'm Lulu. I'm not Maria. So everybody knows me by my nickname. They don't really know who is behind the person. And that is great for a few things. I think it allows a lot of people that are maybe more introvert to get out of their shell and start building relationships. On the other side, it also has a few negatives behind it, which is people tend to be more toxic. Because there's not a lot of the social constraints that you would normally have. If I go playing football with a group of friends or my football team, I'm meeting them in real life, and I know I'm going to be meeting them week after week. So whilst there's some banter going on, there's more social filters in place. Those are not really there in gaming. In gaming, you're most of the times getting thrown into a match with 9 other strangers that it's extremely likely you're never going to meet again in your life. So if you had a bad day at work or anything bad happens, you're more inclined. That's what a lot of people say, you're a lion behind the keyboard, but then a lamb in real life. And that's sort of one of the things that is driving a lot of toxicity in gaming. As well as on the other side, it allows people to have multiple accounts, or what we call smurfing or boosting. So smurfing is when you create a secondary account and you play on a lower skill level than you are. And this normally like boosts the ego of people because you start getting easy win, better stats, but you're destroying the experience of everybody else. Boosting is a little bit the opposite. It's normally people that are high skilled that start logging in into an account of a person that is not that skilled and get that account to a higher level than what that person would naturally be. So yeah, a big part of our strategy was, okay, how can we bring some reality checks and make these accounts a little bit less anonymous? And verification started playing into that. On one end, you can only verify one account. So it's all about creating social currency around your digital profile. So that is the only account you can verify. You cannot verify any secondary accounts, and it is the profile that you're gonna start caring about. Suddenly, it's not like just a throwaway profile that tomorrow I can just recreate if something went wrong.
Exactly, and throwaway profiles is a big issue, obviously, so that's what you're working against. Just to go back to the age estimation topic, and we move on. When we share our age estimation algorithm with clients to try out, and it underestimates their age, nobody asks about the error rate. When it overestimates their age, everybody asks about the error rate. So, moving on, a question about to you, Laura. I'm going to move on to a question about user friendliness. We all talk about identity verification, and then we say in the second breath, how do we make it more user friendly? Well, what does that really mean? I'm going to ask you, Laura, to comment. If you don't mind.
Yeah, I think especially in this world where, for the most part, this is still a choice for people. So where you give a person or a customer the ability to say no, you have to give them a real incentive to say yes, and you do that through fantastic user experience design and being able to sell the benefits of why to do this thing and why now. So being able to speak to our customers quite a lot, and I think it's been fantastic just to see people going from zero knowledge and lots of I guess concern around biometrics to within 5 years it being a well understood and expected part of services. So that time is really low in terms of customer behavioral change, etc. So actually things have changed a little now where they might stand up to a little bit more friction because it's expected. They have been through some of these experiences before, so they know typically how long they take. They also know if they've had good experiences that it becomes a part of the way that you do things. So actually we're seeing that people might bear with a little bit more friction, whereas 5 years ago when they knew nothing about it, low friction was a real priority. The part of this I think that becomes really important is just making it a part of the way that you transact digitally. So if you were able to understand that it is a key way in which you can, for us, make payments or change high risk information on your accounts, so biometrics plays a role within that for us, it actually helps those users gain confidence that they're the only ones that can do this, so no one else can. So that's around how ease and the perception of ease from our customers has changed over the years. And I think COVID had a massive role to play within this because we launched the service mid-COVID and there was a massive change from physical transacting to digital, and therefore biometrics was seen as a way to be able to do that and be able to do more digitally in a time where you weren't able to do it physically. So it's just been massively interesting to see how perception has changed and how that's now starting to inform the way that we design the service.
And Laura, you know, like your weekly adoption rates when you launched during COVID was off the charts, and then you've recently just added voice as well, and we might come back to that later actually. But Shanna, user-friendly from a seller-creator perspective, like how do you make sure you balance? I want to make sure I get the right seller, and I know who that seller is, and I'm not fraudulent. With it has to be friendly.
Yeah, it's a challenge of every day that will continue to evolve, you know, as we grow. I think it's at the forefront of what we think about. There's definitely a couple of key points that, that we've kind of come to understand that it was kind of the sweet spot between the two. I think we're looking for, again, minimal friction. I think, Laura, you made a good point, right? People were used to not having friction at all. Now there's definitely, they're more keen to having a bit of friction because they understand how necessary it is. But we do want to make sure that we keep it to a minimum. We've tried to do that through like seamless integration. I think the Dayon example is the perfect one, right? I think when we've integrated, for identity verification and document verification in particular, the idea was really how do we make it seamless so that they don't even, our sellers don't even see that they've gone through that verification and that it's completed in just a few clicks and a few seconds. Our key metrics is making sure that, the sellers are able to sell as quickly as they can. So, making sure that, it's user friendly, it's only a few clicks, but we're able to achieve that super high level of verification and security has definitely been at the forefront, and we've been able to do that through like seamless integration. I think another thing as well has definitely been kind of risk-based verification, and making sure that we understand who our sellers are from the get-go. So like very early on, understanding what their risk level is and how we can essentially tailor what their experience is going to be on our platform based on that risk level. So obviously, if you're more of a low risk, we might not want to make you go through all of the hoops. Whereas if you've got, if we've got suspicion, we might want to add a little bit of a step up, in your process to make sure that, we've covered everything and that we can, alleviate all of the concerns that we might have. I think, again, Laura, you made a really good point about like the user-centric design and how we need to make sure that our front end and UI is made to enable that. And I think that's been a key focus of ours, to make sure that we can achieve both that friendliness, and that make people come back and talk to, their other seller friends about coming onto our platform, but also making sure that we can target the fraud and make sure that we provide a healthy ecosystem for our buyers.
And obviously working together, we know we're designing different user journeys for different workflows, for different user types and different levels of trust and all that. Actually, that's a great segue though into the question about convincing the participants to register, whether it's register as a seller, register as a player, to go through your particular journey versus somebody else's, and convince them that you're doing the identity verification in a robust way for a really good reason. So Maria, when you guys launched, you did a great communications campaign. You just didn't leave it to a couple of web pages to explain everything. So maybe talk to building the trust with sellers and why it's important, or not sellers in your case, players.
Yeah. So yeah, for us it was very important to build trust with our players, because I think, like as Laura or Shona were saying, there are some user journey where you would expect naturally to go through verification. So I'm opening a new bank account. I think that's like accepted that you would need to verify your identity to be able to do that. Or I want to sell on a platform. Again, that's one kind of user journey where you would expect this to happen. In our case, we were like the first gaming platform asking for people to verify their identity. It's not part of our onboarding journey, so it's something that people can opt into. We're not like enforcing it for everybody, but we wanted to. But obviously, it was one of the key metrics is getting as many people as verified as possible to then be able to provide them with a better experience. So we needed to get them on board with why we wanted to do this. So a lot of our campaign was focused on their pain points. So we know you are upset with smurfing, we know you are upset with boosters, and verifying your account is going to allow you to play with people that we can trust and that you can trust, because it's their real account. It's not, again, as we were saying, a throwaway profile. To get them on the journey, we needed to be in different places, because obviously like we couldn't just do a blog or email and hope that our gamers would read it. That normally doesn't work that way. So we pulled in a lot of gaming influencers, like professional players, or in general like people that you as a gamer would recognize. We did this video campaign on one side where we were playing a little bit with words. So the slogan was "Go verify yourself." I think you can like all understand what it could be leading towards. So yeah, so it was like really done cleverly in terms of okay, what it is that what's your pinpoint and what verification is going to play into getting influencers on board, so that they were the ones going through the floor early on as early adopter, participating in the campaign. And then for us was also like building on this message over and over. So we did that campaign at launch, but then we had a lot of subsequent videos. We are still talking about verification. We are constantly like adding new features that players want and that verification can enable for them. One of the recent things we launched earlier this year was something that we called guaranteed verified matching. So if you are verified and you want to play on our platform, then we guarantee that you're going to play with other verified users. And obviously that created a huge uplift, because it was a great value proposition for players to now know that if they verify, they can play with other people that they can trust. And then a big component of our campaign as well, because it was something that users were obviously mindful of, especially at the start, is around safety and security of how their data is treated. So for us, it was extremely important that we could partner with a global partner, that we could tell players like your documents are going to be stored in this location for this amount of time. This is the only information that instead we are going to receive and store on our hand. Everything is encrypted. Like there's a lot of security around the process, and so getting also them comfortable with like the technological choices that we took was also like another big part of the campaigns we did.
And you had to build that trust with the global audience. Like how many countries are we talking about, Maria?
I mean, I'm not sure on top of my head, but we really operate globally except China for now. So
I think I heard something like over 150 country documents issued coming into our platforms. But that communication was to that diverse group. But I'm going to skip around. There's questions coming in, so I'm going to skip around a bit and skip on to you, Laura, because I think it's a good segue to. So we do identity verification, and we've established trust in this identity, but now we might need to authenticate that person, and the connection between IDV and authentication. Could you comment on that, Laura?
Yeah, of course. And we find in particular, there's the first relationship that you build with a customer, and making sure that the people that you let in through your doors are the right people is obviously the first element that you really need to think about. And within the banking space, actually, I'd say the regulation has somewhat helped us here, because the bar is really clear. There's an obligation on all institutions to be able to demonstrate that they know their customers well, and where they have formed relationships, that they've done so with the right information in mind. That bar is something that is now coming more so into the authentication space. So it's not good enough to only do that level of due diligence at the onboarding stage. You have to make sure that at those high risk transactions that you are reaffirming that the person who's doing that is the person whose account it is. So that is where building biometrics into our mobile app estate, which is where customers are able to seamlessly transact and self-serve, has been really powerful. And we're at 6.6 million people registered for that as of today. And that's only over the course of about 3.5 years. So adoption has been really high in that space. But we know that where there are journeys where fraudsters would be able to make use of, we have biometrics stood in front of those. So whether it's around, the ability to view the details on your card, where before we would have said that is not something that we could ever offer digitally because the risk is too high, we're actually able to now offer that to users because we have such confidence in the strength of the control that sits in front of that. So actually being able to bring that bar into the authentication space for your in-life users, and I guess, Maria, this is back to a little about what you talked about differentiating the experience for people, being able to offer a higher level of service to those people that are using biometrics has been really successful for us because it means that your time is saved. That's something that we hear a lot from our users, which is if this saves me the ability to speak to someone, if this saves me the ability to order a card in the post because I can't remember exactly the details on it, which takes 3 to 5 days, that is a real selling point to our users. So yeah, that's where I guess in the authentication space that this has started to become really powerful, is about differentiating the service that you get as a result.
And then obviously there's a coupling or a relationship between IDV and authentication. Sometimes you want to, as you said, to elevate trust in somebody before you allow them to those new services, redo the KYC or IDV. And actually a lot of people, a lot of governments, but also a lot of service providers are saying, how do I re-KYC my existing customer base? Because we acquired them over a long time, sometimes organically, sometimes through acquisition, and now some things have expired, we want to do the re-KYC. But that touched on something you mentioned earlier, Maria, which is you've identified your player, but then they could go and sell that account, right? So you could solve that with face or biometric, right?
Yes, so that's one of the things we have started looking into, and we are collaborating with Theon about. Obviously, we have two issues. On one side, we wanted to do the identity verification, and we wanted to make sure that then you cannot use the same document or face to verify a secondary account, and that sort of closed the loop. But then there's a different type of loop, which happens quite often in gaming, or I'm pretty sure on other digital, like online platforms as well, which is I might be tired on one side of playing, and my account by then is probably, it could be worth some money, especially if it's a high skilled account, or in some cases you've got a lot of skins attached to it. Maybe some of them are rare. So skins in gaming terms is like digital items that you buy to personalize how your character or weapons or look like, and some of them are rarer than others. So like there's accounts that have value, and in one case you might decide you want to stop playing and you want to sell it. In other cases, what we've seen is obviously verification has created a better experience for players. There are some players that don't want to verify themselves but want to access that experience, and at the same time they might want to do it on an account that is at a higher level than theirs. And there's like businesses out there that their business or is really about creating and reselling these accounts. And when I say businesses, it's like most times it's probably like kids or young people that are creating a bunch of these accounts and then reselling them. But there are quite like it is happening in quite a few cases. So we started getting complaints about how can that account be verified and still like look like a Smurf. And then when we started like investigating those, so there's not an issue with like how our watch list has been set up, but it's actually like people that are verifying that account and then selling it off, and it's verified with the original like person that did the verification. So a way that we are investigating around that is asking for face rechecks, which means that in some cases, for example, if we think that there's been suspicious activity on that account, typically what would happen in these situations, maybe the email has changed, the email address has changed, or an IP, or the IP has changed, and you're suddenly like very far away from where you were before. So there are situations that we can think like that we know that there's been like suspicious activity, and that can trigger a face recheck, which in that case we can match this photo with the original one and close the loop. So we've got a few ideas around that. That's one that we have recently started working on, and hopefully to release it in the next few months.
Very good, very good. Shanna, I might come to you next on a slightly different topic. So, you know, we're going back to the topic of identity verification, or, you know, with sellers, there's more that you can do than just capture the ID document, right? You can do things like address verification. You can ask for proof of address information. You can look at bank statements or utility bills or government documents and look for the legitimacy of them or the authenticity of them. Could you comment on that and how much value they have? I mean, it's not proof positive. Clive is definitely Clive, but it definitely augments the process, right? So.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's part of our obligation to be, verifying the address and making sure that we know where, whether it is the company, where it is, or, the business representative of the business and knowing where they are. So, I think documents in general, regardless of the document, it has advantages and disadvantages. I think when you look at, especially proof of address, for example, it has advantages in, in markets that might not be as data driven, where it's not that easy to do, offline verification. It can also be, an advantage for us to unblock business whenever, you don't have enough offline data, but still a strategic client, and you want to make sure that you go the extra mile to make sure that we can bring them on board. It also is, whenever you've got suspicion of kind of full identity thefts, right? I think we've mentioned that earlier on, right? And you have access to all of the information, but do you truly have access to a bank statement of that person? Maybe not. So it's also a good kind of step up process in that journey. But it all comes with disadvantages. And I think the main disadvantage of documents is it can easily be manipulated, right? I think we've talked about it in the age of AI and everything, how it can very quickly and more ever than before be manipulated. So I think the journey that we've been on is, these documents are important, but we need to make sure that we are set up to make sure that we can make sure that they are actually legitimate. A big part of the work that we do day to day with Dayon is how do we make sure we can do that accurately, and how, we can scale them to all of the markets that we operate in. So there's definitely a journey ahead of us in terms of making sure that we have the right tools and right ability to be able to enable that kind of documents to be submitted. It goes hand in hand with the back-end verification, right, and the offline verification that we do. They're not like standalone processes. They go together. They inform us on the way that we need to kind of go one step forward in order to collect that document.
And there are tools now that and you mentioned AI, that help us determine if the PDF is legitimate or if it's actually been changed. But we need to be able to have different micro journeys depending on what we want that user to go through. I might go back to the user-friendly topic, Laura, for you, and go straight to the digital native question that came in, which is basically some people just live in that digital native world. You probably think about this all the time. How do you appeal to them and the diverse age groups and get them through the process, get them through the journeys?
Yeah, absolutely. And similar to the discussion before, it is about that differentiated level of service and being able to avoid time sink activity mainly. The bar is really low for frustration with digital native users. And it's quite challenging in a fraud prevention landscape, because when you were trying to investigate a fraud or a scam on a person's account, that is inherently frictionful. So it's something where when we go and speak to customers, and we speak to customers across the entire industry, so with our kind of neobanks and then also with our kind of more traditional incumbents, we get a real mix of people who are truly digital native, and where they've had one fraud investigation, they would say that was really annoying, and if it happens again, I would change bank. And that is a really interesting perception to pick up on and then think about, okay, we really need to make sure that we're keeping people safe, but it's that right balance and where we can make it a straight through digital experience, so that the power's in the user's hands and they can resolve things themselves, or that they've got the confidence that they know when it will be resolved. That is becoming an ever increasing obligation to those users, because it's very easy to switch providers if you have an experience that you think has wasted your time inherently. We also know that as digital users adopt this technology, and where we can optimize the service for them, we create a population that's vulnerable by not having adopted these services, and that fraudsters always target the most vulnerable and the loopholes within your process. So actually, while we want to make sure that those who are adopting digital are doing so safely and have a really easy experience to do so, we also want to make sure that we are really looking at and protecting that population that don't yet have digital, which being a bank that has existed for a very long time, we do have our users on book who, they've never banked anywhere else. To your point, Clive, have probably banked before digital account opening ever existed, and would have gone into a physical network, spoke to a physical person, showed their physical documents, and that's how they became a customer. I guess, Shana, to your point about the pros and cons of documents, where someone who has never interfaced digitally suddenly or downloads your mobile app and starts coming into it, you really want to treat that with some care, and that's where step-up authentication and verifying the identity of a person as you do that is really important. So actually, Clive, for your age estimation, I think actually we will probably be a client that's happy the other way around, because if we can tell that an 80-year-old doesn't look quite 80 when they're downloading a mobile app, that's actually really great insight into probably not the person who's trying to do that. So yeah, but it's an interesting balance in terms of, yes, we have our digital natives, but we still have this population that will become the ever-increasing target.
Absolutely. And Shana, you have the same challenge in a different way, because everyone would perceive TikTok Shop but as being a certain age group, but actually you've got a diverse age group and a diverse type of professionalism, from amateur sellers to big brands, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely, the assumption that everybody has, but we have a very diverse, set of brands that are on the platform. We've got very established brands. We've got your small SMB, you've got your sole traders. So obviously, they all come with different backgrounds and different expectations as well of what the process will look like. If they've signed up on other platforms, if, they are used to more standard, more retailing, processes. So it definitely, it definitely has brought us into the challenge. I think when we first launched in the UK in particular, we were very much focused on those kind of, younger age groups, and making sure that we have something that's tailored for them, mostly for your SMBs, smaller businesses. But then as we grew and we onboarded a lot more established brands onto the platform, we had to rethink about how we do onboarding and how that has to be different based on these different expectations, but also age group that they might be coming from. So I think a lot of things that we've been trying to do is, making sure again that we kind of know who they are early, so that we can tailor the right experience for them. I think being flexible in the verification capabilities that we offer, I think, a big point, Clive, that we've had with your team is, being able to do identity verification on your laptop compared to doing it on your mobile. This is something that's really important to us, especially at this point of growth in the business, and making sure that we can enable them to choose the path that actually works for them based on what they're used to. And by also telling them, hey, this is available too in case you want to try it out, right? But not forcing them into that option necessarily. I think another big key point as well has been the support that we provide them with, right? I think when you're a seller, again, you want to make sure that you go through as quickly as possible, but your expectation of customer service might be different. So, whenever you're trying to verify your ID and then, for whatever reason, it doesn't work, or you want more information before starting the process, based on your expectation, you might either reach out to a customer service agent, or you might want to self-serve with all of the, kind of ready to go kind of information that would be available for you on the UI. So it's been kind of tailoring that support mechanism based on who is it that's actually filling out the information on our website. Absolutely.
So tailoring the journeys and tailoring the support for those journeys as well, basically contextual support. So all these tools are, everything we've been talking about is great, but we still have to come back to the topic of, like we talked about it earlier, in trust, privacy and consent. So Maria and Laura, maybe talk to, how do you balance, I really want to know who these people are so I can have the safest service ever, with I actually need be careful and not ask for more information than I need, and I need to get consent for what I'm asking for, and then only use what I'm going to use it for the purpose I asked for. Maria, maybe throw that question to you first, if that's even
Okay.
a question. That's more like a statement.
No, definitely. As we were saying, I feel like there's definitely a need to balance like the type of information you're asking for. Once you're asking that information, how long you're going to be storing it for. Are you going to leverage all the data points in that information or only what you need? So there's like several considerations that come into play. So on our side, the identity verification journey obviously is an opt-in. So we are asking people for consent. It's also it's also biometric data, so you need to have consent in pretty much every jurisdiction that we operate in. Which is not something that you can, like, for example, other data that we have, you might be able to leverage like the fact that you have a contract or legitimate interest. With biometric, it's not that simple, and I mean rightly so, because obviously it's data that is much more personal, if you want. So we are really tailored a journey where we specifically ask consent for every piece of information that we are going to process, so that we can be as transparent as possible to the players, so that they know exactly what's going to happen and what they are consenting to. And then at the same time, obviously, we also needed to find ways to be able to have a watch list. Because in our case, while people want to go through identity verification, obviously, to get a better experience, but there's also like malicious actors that then try to verify on a secondary account. The moment that they find that they are on the watch list, they would want to either withdraw that consent. And so we needed to find also ways to keep that as effective as possible and be sure that we can still like keep our platform safe, because obviously having a watch list is a big part of what this feature is about. So there was like a lot of considerations in, yes, we definitely need consent, but we also know that there's people that are going to try to go around it and use it ultimately against what this feature is trying to do and protect other players.
Very good. And it's more like it's almost like you're creating a whitelist of verified, trusted players, one player, one registration, so and all that. And Laura, from your perspective, this is obviously a key consideration for you as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's where it's been interesting to see the success of biometrics when it is under consent, because you would expect that when something is a choice, that adoption would be a challenge. Normally you bake things into your experience, you make them fundamental, and that's how you build adoption through experiences. So one, I think it speaks to the perception of users that so many people take it up when it is still a choice. But additionally, now that we're kind of at a point of true penetration within our base where a lot of people have taken it up, it's really helped us to identify that fraudsters will go for the non-biometric alternatives as the things that they target. And while we've continued to operate under consent, we must continue to offer alternatives, because as soon as you say there's only one way, that is no longer consent. So from our perspective, I think being able to, I guess, take that challenge on in saying that we really have a substantial interest to protect as many people as possible, and that this is the best way to do so, is allowing us to think about how can we protect as many people as possible and work with our stakeholders and regulators to understand how we can take this further, given that user perception has changed so much in such a short space of time, but also when government services are becoming increasingly digitized, how do we ensure that we make the most of that digitization as well?
No, it's a super point, and it remains true for as long as I've been working in biometrics. If you're offering a biometric solution, you still have to have a non-biometric solution, and that non-biometric solution needs to be convenient and secure as well. And there are ways to do that for sure. But even you guys are offering choice in the biometric space as well, because you're now offering voice and face. I'm going to maybe we're going to run out of time soon. We're going to go straight to the last question that was coming in and on people's minds. Like, this is a question for everybody. What's your nirvana in terms of identity, digital identity verification? What would make your lives so much better? Or what would you wish for? And Shanna, might put you on the spot first for that one, and then go to you, Maria. Laura, give you a chance to think about that question. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in terms of what we're thinking about, I think we definitely want to have something that's scalable. I think, Maria, you talked about the 150 plus countries. This is definitely where we're going, and we want to make sure that we've got scalable and sustainable solutions that help us grow in those markets very quickly. I think one wish would be to be able to have integration of kind of, fully verified digital identity wallets. I think we're not there yet, but it's definitely something that, IDME in the US, kind of EU identity frameworks, like, these are the types of things that, would make it a lot more efficient, a lot quicker, again, for good sellers to be able to go through. Definitely, the differentiated experiences. I think that's been a key point throughout, this panel today, and it's definitely something that we want to take to next level, and being able to provide the right experience based on a seller type, based on a risk level. So I think combining all of these different things and having kind of an orchestration platform that allows us to do that, and having kind of seamless integrations, being able to have waterfall approaches, and being able to kind of achieve all of our goals, which is, essentially remain secure, but also making sure that we grow business as fast as we can, is definitely, what we're thriving for, and, the kind of wish list.
Shauna, great answer. And you made a couple of great points, but one of them was related to wallets and mobile driver's licenses and credentials. So we're seeing the progress, the speed of the progress in that, and what's coming down the track from Australia, Japan, US, UK, Europe. But there's some of the numbers are staggering. So for example, in the US, it's predicted within 2 years, 50% of people will have a mobile driver's license on their phone. In the EU, they're saying by the end of next year, something like 80 million people will have an EU digital wallet. By the following year, twice that many. And even if those timetables are a little bit optimistic, you're talking about 200 million people in Europe having a digital wallet, an EU digital wallet with a credential inside it. And in the US, most of the people having a mobile driver's license. It'll change identity verification immensely, because you won't be pushing a physical document in front of a camera. It'll be more frictionless. So Maria, just on to you. What's your nirvana?
Yeah, I'm very aligned with Shauna. I think that digital wallets are going to revolutionize the space. It's something that we are looking for. But one thing that I would bring further is, if there was to have a way to have a decentralized system to do identity verification, because reality is right now, we are putting people through identity verification. TikTok is doing the same. NatWest is doing the same. If instead there was a third party that would be doing all of that, the user needs to do it once, and then everything is digitalized. We know there's like a safe digital online profile that is recognized, and then every business could just plug into that. I think that would be like massive advancement, because that way you're putting the user through the journey just once, it gets decentralized somewhere, and then everybody else can just plug into and seamlessly, really seamless in that case, obtain that information.
Yeah, reusable digital identity is definitely the nirvana if we can get there, and we'll get to some degree there. I would argue that we don't want one reusable digital identity to rule them all, because it creates a dependency and a single point of failure too. So we might need them in different segments or different sectors or commercial and public or whatever. But that's a topic for another webinar, I would say. So Laura, maybe on to you on that topic.
Yeah, and agree with the points in terms of something that is reusable will have a couple of benefits. One, from a user point of view, I only have to do this once, and it becomes really easy to me. And we've talked a lot today about ease and saving time, so that has obvious benefits. I think for us, the value of that comes that this becomes a shared problem, not an individual problem that individual companies need to solve. And we know that the regulation, particularly in financial services, is really starting to change about shared liability for fraud and scam losses. So you can see that is becoming a shared problem, and a shared solution is probably the way that we really combat that. So yes, completely agree in terms of as a regular human being, it's something I should only really have to think about once and never think about again. And I've got the trust that this is working away in the background and keeping me safe. From an organizational point of view, it's having trust in the network. So being able to say, I've got lots of evidence to suggest that this transaction or this interaction is legitimate. and make it really, really difficult for fraudsters to target that and attack it.
Yeah, no, that would be definitely fantastic. I think with all of that, I have to say, guys, this hour has flown past. We're actually finished. We're at the top of the hour, and it's been a real enjoyable conversation. So listen, thanks, Shanna, Maria, and Laura. Really, thank you very much for making your time and being so open and being so discussive about these topics. So thanks again from everybody, and we'll wrap it up there. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having us.